Chapter 1. My Bad Luck Begins. My name is Robinson Crusoe, and I was born in 1632 in the city of York. My father was a successful businessman. I had two older brothers. One of them was in the army and was killed in the war with Spain. My other brother disappeared one day, and we never knew what happened to him. My father gave me a good education and wanted me to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a sailor and go to sea. My father was very angry with me. He asked me why I wanted to leave his house, where I would have an easy and comfortable life. "Two kinds of people go to sea," he said. "There are the very poor people and the very rich people. The very poor people are ignorant and foolish, and have no other way to live. The very rich people own the ships and make a lot of money with them. You are not foolish, and you are not very rich. You are in the middle, and you should choose a middle way for your life. Most of the bad things in the world happen to the very rich or the very poor. You are lucky to be in the middle. It is safer and easier. Stay home with your mother and me. Your older brother would not listen to me, and now he is dead. If you do not listen to me, you will have a difficult life." I tried to do what he wanted, but I couldn't. I spoke to my mother. "Please ask father if he will let me have one voyage on the sea." I asked her. "When I return, I will live the life he wants me to live." She was very angry. "Don't be a fool. Your father will not let you. How can you even think about it after he spoke to you?" "I agree with him. I do not want you to go to sea. It is too dangerous." I argued with my parents for another year. Then I went to Hull with a friend who was going to London on a ship. He invited me to go with him, and I agreed. I did not ask my parents. I did not even tell them. I just went. That was how all my bad luck began. As soon as the ship set sail, the wind began to blow, and soon we were in a storm. It was my first day at sea, and I was very frightened. I was certain that I would die. I remembered what my father and mother had said. I decided that if I got back safely onto dry land, I would go home to my father and never go on a ship again. The next day the storm was gone. The sea was calm. On the third day, there was almost no wind, and the sun shone on the water. I had never seen anything so beautiful. My friend talked to me about the storm, and that night we drank a lot of punch. I was drunk and soon forgot all about my promise to go home. I even laughed at myself for being frightened on my first day at sea. On the sixth day, the wind was not strong, but it blew the wrong way, so the ship made little progress. We had to wait at Yarmouth for the wind to change direction. A lot of other ships were waiting there too. While we waited, there was another storm. This storm was much worse than the first, and the sailors began to show fear. Even the captain was frightened. One of the other ships sank. I cannot describe how frightened I was. We had a good ship and good sailors, but the waves were so high that water came into the ship. We had to work very hard on the pumps to stop the ship from sinking, but we did not succeed. At last, another ship sent a small boat to help us, and we got on it. 15 minutes later, we saw our ship sink. It took many hours of rowing to bring the boat to the shore. Then we walked to Yarmouth. The people of Yarmouth gave us enough money to go home. I should have gone home. My father would have been happy. I would have lived an easy and happy life. My friend's father was the captain of the ship. He warned me not to go to sea. "This happened on your first voyage," he said. "It is a sign that you should not go to sea. Your father is right. You should stay home." I used my money to go to London. I did not want to go home. I had failed. I was certain that everybody would laugh at me. After a while, I forgot how frightening the storm was, and I began to look for a new voyage. I wanted to see the world. I met a captain who invited me to go with him on a voyage to Africa. I got some money from my relatives and went with him. This was the only successful voyage I ever made. I was often sick during the voyage, but I learned how to navigate and be a sailor. The captain was an honest man and helped me to buy things in Africa that I could trade. When we returned to England, I sold them and made a good profit. I was very pleased and decided to go on another voyage as soon as I could. I was a successful trader. I left half the money I had with a friend and took the other half with me. This time, however, my usual bad luck returned. Chapter 2. How I Got to Brazil. As we came close to Africa, we were attacked by pirates. 3 of our men were killed, and the rest of us were taken to Salé in Morocco. The pirate captain made me his personal slave. I hoped that he would take me to sea with him, but he didn't. He left me at his house to look after his garden and do the usual work of slaves. I dreamed about escaping, but I could not see how I could do it. 2 years later, I finally had a chance to escape. The captain stayed at home for a longer time than usual. During this time, he often took me out in a small boat to go fishing with him. I had to row the boat. He usually took a young boy with him too, and we would catch fish for him. Sometimes he was too busy, and he would send a relative called Ishmael out with us to catch his dinner. Once the sea was very calm, but it was very foggy. We could not see where we were going. We were not far from the shore, but we could not see it. We went the wrong way and spent a whole day and night going out to sea. Finally, we saw the shore and rowed back again. The captain put some food and other things in the boat in case we got lost again. One day he told me to go and catch some fish. Ishmael would go with us. I arranged to get extra food and water onto the boat by making up an excuse. I also got some other things like guns and axes. We went out to fish. When we were far enough from the shore, I pushed Ishmael off the boat into the water. I knew he could swim very well, and I told him to swim to the shore. The boy, whose name was Zuri, was afraid that I might push him into the sea, too, and promised to go with me. We sailed a long way south before we went back to shore to get more water. I did not know where we were. We put down the anchor near a small river and waited for night before going to get water. However, there were a lot of strange noises at night, and we were too frightened to go on shore, so we waited again until morning. We saw some huge animals that we did not know. They made terrible noises. When we went on shore, we killed a strange animal and found some water. We did not see any wild people who might kill us. We sailed further south along the coast. We passed wild lands. The savages who lived here were probably cannibals, so we tried to stay away from them. Once we killed a huge animal. We could not eat it, but we took its skin. I dried it in the sun, and it made a good blanket to lie on. We sailed for about 10 or 12 days. We ate very little. I hoped that if I went far enough, we would meet a ship near Cape de Verde. One day we saw some people on the shore. They were black and wore no clothes at all. We were afraid of them, and they were afraid of us too. I made signs to them from the boat, and they brought some food to the shore. We got it into the boat and ate it. We were very hungry. As we were about to leave, some large animals came to the shore, and all the black people ran away. I shot one of the animals. The people were very afraid of the noise of the gun. They were surprised to see that the animal was dead. They became our friends and gave us water and more food. Now I had enough water and food to sail for another 10 days, and we finally reached Cape de Verde. Zuri saw a ship, and this frightened him. He thought the Moroccans were chasing us. It was, however, a Portuguese ship. I sailed up to her, and the crew took us on board. The captain said he would take me with him. They pulled my boat onto the ship too. They were going to Brazil. This captain was a very honest man. He looked after me. When we arrived in Brazil, he bought my boat from me. He introduced me to a man who had a farm, and I worked for him for a while. I used the money I got from the captain and the money I earned to buy some land and start my own farm. The Portuguese captain was a true friend. He sailed back to England and got my money. He bought some useful things for me and brought them to Brazil. Now I had very good tools for my farm. I was also able to sell a lot of things he brought back, and I made a good profit. I bought a slave and hired a servant. My farm produced a lot of tobacco, and I grew rich. I was a successful farmer. Chapter 3. Shipwrecked. I soon became bored with being a farmer. I was living the middle life that my father had told me to live. Why did I come here to live the middle life? I asked myself. I could have lived like this in England. After 4 years, I had learned the native language and made many friends in Brazil. I was a successful farmer. I often told my friends about the first voyage I made to Africa and how I had made a profit from trading. Some of my friends needed more black Africans to work on their farms, but these men were very expensive to buy. They decided to send a ship to Africa to get some black Africans there. My neighbor offered to look after my farm while I went with the ship to Africa. I could not refuse. Foolishly, I agreed to go. I made a will, and soon we were ready to sail. The ship had 16 men. We had good weather at first and sailed north along the coast of Brazil. However, as soon as we left the coast and headed toward Africa, there was a terrible storm. The wind blew the ship in all directions, and we could not steer it. The storm lasted for 12 days. We did not know where we were. 2 of the men died in the storm. After the storm, the captain found that we had gone a long way north. The ship was damaged, and he wanted to return to Brazil. I knew that we could not sail to Africa on the damaged ship, but I did not want to go back to Brazil either. We decided we could sail to Barbados and fix the ship before going on. It would take about 15 days to get there. As we sailed there, another storm drove the ship westward. Every moment, we thought the ship would sink. Again, we did not know where we were. We were lost. After several days of this, one of the men saw land. Before we could see anything else, the ship hit a sandbar and stopped. The sea came over the ship and began to break it. We prepared ourselves to die. Some of the men managed to put our small boat into the sea, and we all got into it. The wind blew the waves very high, but it also blew us toward the shore. We were certain that the big waves would smash the boat on the shore. Suddenly, an even larger wave turned the boat upside down, and we all fell into the wild sea. The wave carried me toward the land. I could not breathe. I thought I would die. Then I felt sand under my feet. I tried to stand up. I got some air. I stood and walked forward. Another wave knocked me down again and drove me forward. I was terrified. I did not know which way was up. I could not breathe. The wave carried me for a long time. My head came out of the water and into the air. I breathed. Suddenly, my body hit a rock. It hurt me, but I hung on to it. The wave went back. The next wave carried me forward again. At last, I was able to climb out of the water. I sat on the beach. I was glad to be alive because I was certain that I was going to die in the waves. I stood up and walked about. I hoped that some of the other men were safe too, but they were not. I never saw any of them again. They had all drowned. I found 3 hats and 2 shoes, but that was all. I looked at the ship. It seemed a long way away. I wondered how I had got to the shore. What would happen to me now? I was wet and cold. I had no food or water. I did not know where I was. Would I be eaten by wild animals? Would I be killed by savage people? Would I die of hunger and thirst? I did not know. It was beginning to grow dark. I needed water. Luckily, I found a small stream a few hundred meters from the beach. Then I climbed into a tree so that no wild animals would find me and fell asleep. When I woke up, it was day. The storm had stopped. I was very surprised to see that the ship was now quite close to the shore. The tide had lifted it from the sandbar, and the waves had driven it closer to the land. I walked along the beach and found the boat lying on the sand a few kilometers away. However, I could not reach it because there was a large inlet of water between me and it. I went back toward the ship and found that the tide had gone out. I could walk almost right up to the ship. I realized that if we had stayed on board, we would all be alive. This made me very sad. Why was I the only one alive? There is no answer to this question. I decided to try and get onto the ship and see if I could find some useful things. I swam to the ship and climbed onto it. I found some food and drink. I threw some large pieces of wood into the water and tied them together to make a raft. I put a lot of wood on the raft and then some boxes, which I filled with food. I had some bread, some rice, and some cheese. I got some dried goat meat and some corn as well. Then I got some clothes, and I found the carpenter's tools. These tools were worth more than gold to me. Then I also got some guns and gunpowder and 2 old swords. I brought all these onto the raft and back to the beach. Some of the boxes almost fell into the water, but I saved them and finally got everything onto the shore safely. As soon as I could, I climbed up a hill that was nearby to see where I was. Was I on a continent or an island? Were there people? Were there wild animals? From the top of the hill, I could see that I was on an island. The sea was all around me, and I could see no other land. I saw no sign of people on the island, nor any wild animals. There were a lot of birds, but I did not know what type of birds they were. I shot a large bird, but its meat was terrible. I could not eat it. I returned to the raft and made a small hut with the wood I got from the ship. It was not very strong, but I was afraid of wild animals attacking me during the night. It was almost low tide again, so I swam back to the ship and brought back another raft of valuable things. I got some nails and axes and a grindstone to keep the axes sharp. I also got some iron bars, a lot of clothes, and some more guns. I found a sail and a hammock. I made a new raft and brought everything to shore. When I returned, I saw an animal like a cat sitting on one of the boxes. It was not afraid of me. I gave it some food. It ate the food and walked into the forest. I made a tent with the sail and brought everything valuable into it. Then I made a circle around it with boxes and pieces of wood to stop animals or people from attacking me during the night. Every day at low tide, I went back to the ship and got more things. I had a lot of rope, and I took all the sails. I was surprised to find more food and gladly brought that back to shore as well. Once the raft tipped near the shore, and everything fell into the water. However, the water was not deep there, and I managed to save most of my things. It was very hard work. On the 12th day, I found some scissors and knives as well as some money. While I was on the ship, the wind began to blow, and I was afraid that I would not be able to get back to the shore. I did not make a raft that day, but swam back with the scissors, knives, and money. I knew the money was useless, but I took it anyway. That night there was a storm, and when I woke in the morning, the ship was gone. The storm had broken it up. I was very pleased that I had worked so hard to get what I could from it. Chapter 4. The First Year. I had to make a safe place to live. I could not stay where I was because there was no fresh water there. I found a good piece of flat ground up a hill, with a cliff on one side and a good view of the sea. I put up my tent near the cliff. I cut some wood and made a strong fence around the area. The fence did not have a gate or door. I used a ladder to get over it to reach my tent, and then pulled the ladder inside the fence. Nobody else could come in. I was safe. I brought all my things inside the fence. It took a long time to do this, sometimes in heavy rain. I made a kind of cave in the cliff behind me, and I put a lot of things there to keep them dry. During one storm, I was afraid that lightning would hit my gunpowder and I would lose it all. After the storm, I divided the gunpowder into small piles and put them in different places. Every day I went out with my gun to shoot something that I could cook and eat. I found that there were goats on the island, and I soon shot one. Every day I made a mark on a piece of wood with an axe. This way, I knew how long I had been on the island. I had some paper and ink from the ship, and I made notes about my new life. It was a terrible, lonely life, but at least I was alive. And I had saved many useful things from the ship, which would help to keep me alive. I found a tree that had very hard wood to make a spade so that I could dig. This helped me to make my cave bigger. I made a table and chair. They were very difficult to make and took a long time. However, I did not worry about time because I had nothing else to do except to feed myself and stay alive. Sometimes I climbed up the hill to see if there might be a ship, but I never saw one. I also continued to write in my journal until I had no more ink. I was busy for months. I made my fence stronger. I shot birds and goats. I saved one goat, and it became a pet. I had thrown some old pieces of corn on the ground beside a rock, and I was surprised some time later to see it grow. I could not understand this at first because I had forgotten about the corn I had thrown there. There was also some rice. When it grew up, I saved the seed and planted it again. Still, in my first year, I decided not to eat the crops. I planned to save them until I had enough seed and crops. This would not be until my 4th year on the island. I was in my cave one day when the roof began to fall down. I was very frightened and ran out and over the fence. As soon as I was out, I realized that an earthquake was happening. The ground shook 3 times. I saw rocks fall into the sea and waves that were worse than those in a storm. I thought all my work would be destroyed. However, after the 3rd shock, there was no more, and I began to feel safer. Then a terrible storm came, but I did not dare to go inside my cave. The wind blew some trees off the ground. Then it began to rain. It rained so hard that I had to go into the cave. It rained all night and most of the next day. I could not go out. When the storm stopped, I began to look for another place to move my tent. I saw that the wind and the earthquake had moved the wreck of the ship closer to the beach. I could walk there at low tide, and I spent the next few weeks getting more wood from it. I began to feel cold, although the weather was warm, and a day or 2 later I was really sick. I had headaches. I perspired. I shivered. I could not eat. I had bad dreams. I was afraid. I thought about my father and his advice. I cried. I slept. I was sick for 2 weeks. Then I felt better. But I was very weak. I ate some turtle eggs and drank some rum. I walked slowly down to the beach. I thought I was lucky to be alive. I went back to bed and slept again. I think I slept for 2 days. When I woke up, I decided that I should try to be as happy as possible on the island. I had been there for almost a year. I had been busy making a safe place to live and looking after my food. Now I wanted to see the rest of the island. I followed the stream into the island and found a beautiful grassy area with wild fruit trees. There were oranges, lemons, and grapes. The grapes were ripe, and I ate some. I put some out in the sun to dry. When I came back the next day, some wild animals had eaten them. I picked some more and hung them on the trees. The sun dried them out, and I had enough raisins to eat all winter. They were delicious. I spent a lot of time in that place and thought about moving my tent there. The only problem was that I would not be able to see a ship from there. I decided to stay where I was before. However, I did put up another tent at the new place so that I could stay there for a few days at a time. I built a fence around this tent too. I thought I was very rich. I had 2 houses, one by the sea and one in the country. However, there were still some things that I needed and did not have. I needed a basket to carry things and a pot to boil water and make soup. Chapter 5. A Foolish Mistake. It began to rain and did not stop for 2 months. This was the rainy season. I had been on the island for a whole year. I could not believe that I was still alive and wondered what would happen to me. After the rainy season, I went out and found some plants that had thin branches, and I used the branches to make some baskets. This made it much easier to transport my food and other useful things. Then I began to think about making a pot. I searched the island for clay. I made some pots and dried them in the sun, but they fell apart when I tried to cook in them. Then I discovered that one of the pieces, which had fallen in the fire, became very hard. I made a pot and made a hot fire all around it. It became very hard, and I was able to make soup in it. After that, I made more baskets and pots. I decided to see the rest of the island. I crossed to the other side, and there I could see land. It was far away, and it made me curious. I thought it might be part of America. That side of the island was very pleasant, and I thought that I would have more chance of seeing a ship there, too. There were a lot of turtles and birds on the beach, but I did not think about going to live there. I liked my home on the other side of the island and did not want to do all that work again to build a new home. I caught a parrot, and when I returned home, I spent about a week making a cage for it. I wanted to teach it to speak, but this took more than 2 years. Sometimes I felt that I was in a prison. I was locked up by the sea and could never escape. I never saw or spoke to another person. Sometimes I cried like a child. Then I would look around at my home. I thought how lucky I was to have everything I needed. I had clothes and food and shelter from the sun and the rain. I was healthy and safe and always busy. Thinking about this made me happier again. I spent a lot of time making a large shelf for my cave. I found a big tree and chopped it down. This took 3 days. Then I chopped off the branches. This took another 2 days. After that, I chopped the wood away from one side and then from the other side. This took more than 1 month. Altogether, it took 42 days. In England, 2 men with a good saw could have made 6 of these shelves from that tree in half a day. I also spent a lot of time looking after my corn and rice crops. I had to protect them from wild animals and birds, so I made a fence around them. I shot some of the birds and hung them up near the corn. After that, all the other birds stayed away. I used one of the old swords I had taken from the ship, cut down the corn when it was ready. I was very proud of my corn and rice and worked hard to increase my crops. A few years later, I would have enough corn to make bread. I had to find a way to grind the corn into flour, but the rocks on the island were not hard enough. I finally discovered that a very hard piece of wood would do. I used some cloth to separate the meal from the husks. Not having an oven, I made some square pots with lids and covered them with hot ashes. This baked the dough, and I had bread. I made my cave bigger again to hold the corn and flour so that I could make bread whenever I needed to. I sometimes wondered how I could get to the land which was visible from the other side of the island. I went to the ship's boat that was blown onto the beach in the shipwreck. However, I could not get it to the water. It was too heavy. I tried many different ways of doing it, but none of them were successful. Sometimes I wasted a lot of time doing foolish things. I tried to make a canoe from a tree trunk. I chopped down a huge tree, which took me 34 days. It took a month to shape it into a boat and another 3 months to make a hollow. After finishing it, I was pleased to see that it was large enough to carry 20 men. I could easily take all my things with me. The canoe was only 100 meters from the water, but I could not move it. It was too heavy. I thought I could dig a canal to the boat. I later calculated that it would take 10 years to dig this canal. This was too long, so I stopped. What a waste of time, I thought. I should have thought of this before I started. Chapter 6. A Dangerous Voyage. While I was working on the boat, I always thought about one thing. I thought how happy I would be if I could escape from the island. When I realized that I could not move the boat and get it into the water, I changed my mind. I had a very nice home. I had more than enough food. I also thought that it might be dangerous to go to the land that I had seen from the other side of the island. There were probably savage people there that might kill me and even eat me. Perhaps they were cannibals. I knew that cannibals lived in this part of the world. I decided that it was probably better to stay on the island. At least I was safe there. I should say something about my clothes. It was hot on the island, so I needed clothes to protect me from the sun. I never went out without a hat. I had a lot of clothes from the ship, and I also made new clothes out of animal skins. I even made an umbrella out of goat skin. When I had been on the island about 5 years, I made another canoe. This time, I made a small one. It was too small to go to the land I saw, but I thought I could go around the island in it. I put food and water in it, together with guns and my umbrella. Then I set off. When I reached the east side of the island, I saw a long line of rocks going out into the ocean. I had to go around them, but I could not see how far they went. I went on shore and climbed up a hill. I could see the end of the rocks from there. I could also see that there was a strong current, which could be dangerous. I stayed there for 2 days, waiting for the wind to be right for sailing. The sea was calm on the third day. I put my boat back into the water and sailed along the line of rocks. When I got to the end, I was suddenly in very deep water. The current was much stronger than I had expected, and I was soon carried out to sea. I was taken further and further away from the island, and could not do anything to get back. I thought I would die. I had some food and water, but if I could not get back to the island, I would soon starve. I was very unhappy. How wonderful the island seemed now. I loved my island. It was not a prison. It was home. It was the best place in the world. I wanted to be there. I was soon so far away that I could hardly see the island. I rowed very hard to get out of the current. Then the wind came up and helped me to get out of it. I spent the whole day rowing and sailing back toward the island. It was very dangerous out there. I had to get back before dark. You cannot imagine how happy I was when I got back onto the beach. I decided that I would never leave the island again. I put the canoe in a little inlet and lay down to sleep. The next day, I sailed close to the shore. I came to the beach on the other side of the island. I put my canoe in a safe place and walked across the island to my country home, where I lay down to sleep again. I woke up when I heard somebody calling my name. I was frightened to hear this, until I realized that it was only my parrot. He had learned to say my name. For the next year, I did not do anything dangerous at all. I looked after my corn and made some more baskets and pots. My pet goat grew old and died. It was now my 11th year on the island. I did not have much gunpowder left. I needed to catch some goats and breed them so that I did not have to hunt them. I caught some of them in traps and made fences to keep them in. This was a lot of work and kept me busy for a long time. At first, I made the area so large that I would never be able to catch a goat in it. I had to make it smaller. I often fed the goats by hand so that they would not be frightened of me. This would help me to catch them later. I also got milk from the goats, and I even learned to make cheese. Chapter 7. A Footprint. I often went to visit my canoe on the other side of the island. Sometimes I took it out to sail, but I never went far from the shore. I kept it in good order. On one of these visits to my canoe, I saw something that I could not believe. I was walking toward the canoe on the beach when I saw it. There was a footprint in the sand. My life changed. There was somebody on the island with me. I listened. I looked around. I ran up and down the beach. I went back to the footprint to see if there were more. Was it just my imagination? No, there it was. A footprint with 5 toes and a heel. One footprint. How did it get there? Whose foot was it? Suddenly, I was very frightened. I ran across the island, hurrying back to my home. Every tree, every movement, and every shadow looked like a man. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. That footprint kept me awake. Perhaps savages from the land across the sea had come to the island. Would they find me, or my canoe, or my country house? What would they do if they did? Even if they didn't find me, they might take my corn, or my canoe, or my goats. Perhaps I should destroy everything so that they would not know that there was someone on the island. I did not dare to leave my home for 3 days. Then I suddenly wondered whether the footprint might be from my own foot. Perhaps I had walked there earlier. This made me braver. I came out of my house. I needed some food and had to milk the goats. I did these things before going back to the other side of the island. I was still afraid and was ready to run back home at any moment. The footprint was still there. It was much bigger than my foot. Now I knew that somebody else had been on the island. I carefully went back home, ready to fight or shoot if I saw anybody. I built a second wall around my home and cleared the land in front of it. If anyone came near my home, I would see them. Then I made another place for my goats and kept half of them in each field. If one group of goats was discovered, I would still have the other. All this building took about 2 years. The footprint still worried me. I searched the island for other safe places to keep my goats. I went to the western side of the island, where I had never been before. From the top of a hill, I thought I could see a ship in the distance, but I could not be certain. I came down the hill to the western end of the island. I saw something there that made me realize how lucky I had been. I was horrified to see human bones lying on the sand. Ashes showed where there had been a fire, and there were logs in a circle around it. I could see that savages came here, and that they were cannibals. I felt sick. I ran from there as quickly as I could. I couldn't believe my good luck. I had been on the island for 18 years and had never seen the savages, and they had never seen me. If they had seen me, they would have killed me. I was certain that if I stayed quiet, they would never find me. I stayed close to my 2 homes and my goat field for the next 2 years. I did not go often to visit my canoe and thought about making another one on my side of the island. I always had my gun with me. However, I never shot anything in case the savages were on the island and heard the shot. When I thought about the bones on the beach, I wanted to kill the savages who did it. I made many different plans. What could one man do against perhaps 20 or 30? Perhaps I could dig a hole under their fire and fill it with gunpowder. But this would not kill enough of them, and I did not want to lose all my gunpowder. Perhaps I could take all my guns to the western hill and start shooting at them. I went there to decide where I would put the guns. I prepared the guns. Every morning, I would go to the top of the hill to see if any boats were coming. I did this for about 3 months, but it was a long way to the top of the hill, and I never saw any boats. This gave me more time to think about my plan. Was it a good idea? What would happen if I killed some, and the others escaped? They would tell others that I was on the island and returned to avenge the death of their friends. Perhaps the safest thing to do was to leave them alone. They only used one side of the island. We had not seen each other. I decided to stay away. I no longer went up the hill to see whether they had returned. I was even quieter than before. I stopped making fires at my seaside home. I didn't want the savages to see the smoke. I made all my fires at my country home in the woods, which was further away. Chapter 8. Another Shipwreck and a Rescue. I found a cave near my country home. When I first entered the darkness of this cave, I saw a pair of eyes looking at me, and this frightened me. However, I soon discovered that it was just an old goat lying there to die. I brought most of my guns and my gunpowder to this cave to keep them safe. The old goat died the next day, and I buried him. I felt very safe in my new cave. The savages would not find me here. However, I still slept at my seaside house every night. I was very happy on my island and would gladly have lived there for the rest of my life. I only had one problem. It was a big problem. I was afraid of the savages, who might kill and eat me. One morning I woke up very early and saw a fire on the beach, about 2 kilometers away, and on my side of the island. No savages had ever been there before. I immediately loaded my guns and got everything ready to fight if they found me. I was worried that they might find my corn or my goats. I sat in my house and waited, ready to fight. After about 2 hours of waiting, I wanted to see what was happening. I went up a small hill to look at the fire. There were 9 savages sitting around the fire. They had 2 canoes. When the tide began to go out, they put their canoes in the water and left. I climbed further up the hill and saw 3 more canoes leaving from the western side of the island. I went to the beach and found parts of human bodies there and buried them. Now I felt quite certain that one day the cannibals would find me, and I knew what to expect. My life on the island was no longer happy but full of fear. However, nothing happened until 15 months later. I was surprised to hear a ship's cannon at sea. It was nighttime, and there was a storm. When I heard the cannon, I ran to the top of the hill and saw that there was a ship near the rocks on the southern side of the island. I lit a big fire. I think the ship saw it because I heard 2 more shots. In the morning, I could see that the ship had hit the rocks and was stuck there. I hurried back to the house and got my canoe. I hoped that there might be people alive on the ship. That would make me so happy, even if there was only one. I was worried about being carried out to sea again, so I went back to the top of the hill to study the currents. When it was safe, I went out to the ship. I found 2 dead men on it. The back part of the ship had broken off and sunk. I found a couple of boxes and put them in my canoe. I also found some guns, an iron spade, 2 kettles, and a metal pot. I put all these in my canoe and went back to shore. I opened the boxes and found some very useful things in them. There were some good clothes and some delicious food and drink. There was also quite a lot of money. It, of course, was useless to me. The shoes I found were much more useful. I carried everything to my seaside house. I put the money in the cave. Nothing happened for the next 2 years. I looked after my corn and my goats. However, something had changed. The shipwreck reminded me of the world I had left. I began to think again about escaping, but I was still afraid of the savages. Then I thought that if I could catch one of them when they came to the island, I could make him a friend. Then he could help me escape. I went to the western end of the island very often, but there were never any savages there. More than a year after I had made this decision, I found 5 empty canoes on my side of the island in one day. 5. Where were the savages? I went up the hill and looked around. I saw them on the beach. There were 30 of them. They were cooking some meat, and some of them were eating it. I could see 2 prisoners. They knocked one down and started to cut him into pieces. The other one ran away. He ran very quickly. He ran toward my seaside house. Of course, he could not see it behind the trees and the fences I had made. 3 of the savages chased him, but he ran faster. He swam across the small inlet. Only 2 of the savages could swim. The 3rd one stayed on the other side. I realized that this was my best chance for getting a friend or slave to help me escape. I ran back to my house and took my guns. Then I ran down to the beach and got between the escapee and the 2 savages chasing him. I knocked one of them down and shot the other one. The escapee was frightened by the sound of the gun. He stood still, shaking with fear. I made signs to him to come to me, and at last he did. He knelt at my feet. He put his head on the ground and placed my foot on it. He said something that I could not understand. The man I had knocked down began to wake up. I was going to shoot him, but the escapee asked for my sword. I gave it to him. He ran at the man and cut off his head. I was afraid that the other savages would come to find their friends. My new friend buried the 2 men we had killed, and then I took him to the cave near my country home. I gave him some bread and raisins and some water to drink. Then I showed him where he should sleep. He seemed to be about 26 years old and had a friendly face. He had black hair and very lively eyes. I milked the goats while he slept. When he woke up, I gave him some milk and bread. I called him Friday because that was the day I found him, and I taught him to call me master. I kept him there all night, and in the morning I took him back with me to the seaside house. He wanted to dig up the dead men to eat. As soon as I understood what he wanted, I showed him that I was angry, and he stopped. I gave him some clothes. The other savages had left in their canoes. Chapter 9. Life with a Friend. I made a place for Friday to sleep between the 2 fences around my house so that he could not attack me during the night. However, this was not necessary, for Friday was the most faithful servant you could imagine. He was also a very good student and quickly learned everything that I taught him. Soon he was able to use some English words. It took him a long time to understand what a gun was and stop being afraid of it. I had to shoot several animals and birds before he stopped running away. I cooked some goat meat for him, and he enjoyed eating it. The next day, I showed him how to help me make bread from corn. Then I realized I would need more corn because there were now 2 people to feed. I taught him how to dig the ground and prepare it for planting. He worked very hard and was always obedient. This was the best year that I spent on the island. Friday began to speak more English, and we talked about his country. I also asked him about the voyages they made across the sea, and I discovered where we were. The land I could see from the other side of the island was Trinidad. He told me that he knew about white men living a long way away. I could get there in a large canoe. I told him about my life on the island. I described England to him. Then he told me about a boat that came to their country one day with 17 white men in it. They lived with the savages there. I realized that they must have come from the ship that was wrecked near my island. "Why did you not eat them?" I asked. "We only eat men after we win a war against them," he answered. I took him to the top of the hill, from where I saw the land. He was very excited. "There is my country," he said. Perhaps he wanted to go back to his own people. He said he would not go there unless I went with him. I showed him my canoe on the other side of the island. We sailed in it, but he said it was too small to go across the sea to his country. Then I showed him the big boat I had made over 20 years ago, but could not get to the water. He said it was big enough, but it was broken and rotten. I told him we would make another one, so that he could go back to his people. He was very upset. He gave me an axe. "Kill me," he said, "but do not send me away. I will stay with you always." Now I knew that he would always be my friend. "I will go with you," I said. I wanted to see the 17 white men and perhaps return to England. Friday chose a tree, and we cut it down. It took about 1 month to make the large canoe. It took another 2 weeks to get it to the water. Then I made a mast and some sails for it, as well as a rudder. This took another 2 months. Then I taught Friday how to sail. He was very good at it. Then the rainy season started, and we had to wait for better weather. I began to get things ready. I put some food in the new boat. It would be enough to feed both of us for over 2 weeks. One morning, I sent Friday to get some turtles from the beach. He came back, running very quickly. "Master, master, 3 canoes!" He was very frightened and ran straight into the house to hide. I told him not to worry and gave him some rum to make him brave. We agreed to fight the savages. From the hill, I could see 21 of them and 3 prisoners. I gave Friday some guns and a sword. "Follow me. Don't speak or shoot until I tell you," I said. The trees grew quite close to the beach where the savages were. They had a fire and were already eating one of their prisoners. A white man was lying on the ground. His hands and feet were tied. We came close to them, staying hidden in the trees. They were untying the white man when I ordered Friday to shoot. We killed 3 of them and wounded 5 more. The others did not know where to run. They could not understand what had happened because they had never seen or heard guns before. They heard loud noises and saw some of their people fall down dead. They were very frightened. We picked up our other guns and fired again. 2 more were killed, and many of them were wounded. Then we ran out and shouted loudly at the savages. Some of them got into one of the canoes, but Friday shot at them and killed a few. I ran to the white man and cut his ropes with a knife. He was very weak. I gave him some rum and bread. He told me he was Spanish. I gave him a gun and a sword. He immediately ran at the savages and cut 2 of them into pieces with the sword. I reloaded the guns while Friday and the Spaniard fought the savages. One was about to kill the Spaniard with a sharp wooden sword, but the Spaniard shot and killed him. In the end, we killed all of them except 4. They escaped in a canoe. The Spaniard was so tired that he had to lie down. Friday wanted to chase them in one of the other canoes, and I agreed. We jumped into one of the other canoes, but there we found another man tied up, ready to be cooked and eaten. I untied him and called Friday to come and talk to him. When Friday saw him, he kissed and hugged him, and cried and laughed and jumped and danced, and sang and cried again. It took a long time before he could tell me that this man was his father. I had never seen two men as happy as they were. It was too late now to chase the canoe because it was almost out of sight. I was pleased that we did not go after them, however, because an hour later there was a storm, and we would all have drowned. Friday ran off to the house and brought water for his father and the Spaniard. He also brought bread and raisins for them. They were very weak. Their bodies were so sore that they could not even walk. We had to carry them to a canoe and brought them to the beach near my seaside house. Their extremely sore feet were black and blue from being tied up. We gently picked them up from the canoe and carried them into the house. We made beds for them using straw and blankets. Chapter 10. Mutineers. That evening, I felt like a king. I had my own land. The whole island was mine. I had 3 people in my kingdom. Each one would do anything I told them to do and would die for me if necessary. Of course, I had to feed them. Friday and I made a huge dinner with goat meat and corn. We made rice and meat soup and had a very good dinner. After dinner, I sent Friday to bury the dead savages and bring back the guns we had left there. I asked Friday and his father whether they thought the canoe with 4 savages would be able to return to their country. They thought that they would all drown in the storm. If they did get back safely, would they come and attack us? I asked. We think they would be too frightened because of the guns, they replied. I discovered later that they were right. The savages did return to their land, but were so frightened that they never dared to come to my island again. Then I spoke to the Spaniard. He and the men with him often talked about escaping, but they had no boats, tools, or food. I thought that if we could get them all to my island, we could build a big boat together. It might be big enough to sail a long way and escape. However, I was worried that they would turn against me. They were all Spanish, and I was the only Englishman. However, the Spaniard promised that they would not hurt me. I decided that I would send him and Friday's father to bring them to the island. The Spaniard, however, said we should wait. You will not have enough food, he said. For so many people, we should build a bigger farm and grow more corn, so that we will have enough food for everyone. This was good advice. We all dug for a month. Then we planted the corn. It would take 6 months to grow. I went all over the island looking for good trees to cut down for the ship we would build. I increased the number of goats in my fields. We hung many grapes on the trees to make raisins and made more baskets and pots. When everything was ready, I put the Spaniard and Friday's father in one of the canoes. I gave them each a gun and enough food and water for a week. Friday and I watched them leave. I was very excited. I thought that this was the beginning of the end of my time on the island. I would leave it when they returned. I didn't know that I would leave it before they returned. One day, I was asleep in my house when Friday ran in to tell me that he saw a boat coming. I ran out to see, but it was not the Spaniards. I did not know who it was. I told Friday to keep out of sight. We must first know whether they are friends or enemies, I told him. I went to the top of the hill. From there I saw a ship lying at anchor. It looked like an English ship. The boat coming toward the beach looked like an English boat. I was very excited yet confused. I did not know what to think. I had been on the island 28 years. The thought of talking to an Englishman again was very exciting, but I was afraid. Why was an English ship here? It was a long way from where the English sailed. This was the Spanish part of the world. I decided to wait longer before letting them see me. I counted 11 men on the boat. They came to the shore, and some of them got out of the boat. I was surprised to see that 3 of the men were tied up like prisoners. I did not know what was happening. I expected to see the 3 prisoners killed at any moment. I wished that the Spaniard and Friday's father were still with me, so that we could rescue them. Some of the men walked up the beach, and the prisoners sat down. They looked sad. 2 men had stayed on the boat. They fell asleep and did not notice the tide going out. Soon it was too late to get the boat back into the water. They had to wait until the next high tide. They might find my house. I got everything ready for a fight. It was a hot day, and the men were tired. They lay down under some trees and fell asleep. The 3 prisoners still sat on the beach. I came close to them and spoke to them in English. They were very surprised to see me. "Don't be afraid," I said. "You may have a friend where you do not expect to find one." One of the prisoners told me that he was the captain of the ship. His men had mutinied against him. The other 2 men were the first mate and a passenger. The men had decided to leave the 3 of them on the island and sail away in the ship. "I can kill them all while they are sleeping," I said, "or I can make them all prisoners. What would you like me to do?" "2 of them are very bad," he said. "I think that the others will obey me if those 2 are killed." We moved further away from the sleeping mutineers. I told the captain that if I decided to save him, he had to make 2 promises. First, he would obey me while he was on the island. Second, he would take me and Friday to England without payment. He agreed, and I gave each of them a gun. Chapter 11. Victory. Some of the mutineers were waking up. The captain and his 2 men went to them and shot 2 of them dead. Some of the others were wounded. All those still alive promised the captain that they would obey him and take him to Jamaica on the ship. We tied them up. Friday and the first mate went to the boat and tied it up. They took the sail and the oars out of it so that nobody could use it to return to the ship. I took the captain, the first mate, and the passenger into my home and told them my story. Then we talked about what we should do next. The captain was worried. "There are still 26 men on the ship," he said. "They have all mutinied, and know that they will be hanged if we take them back to England. That is the law. How can we attack them? There are only 5 of us." "Some of the men on the ship will wonder where their friends are," I said. "They will come in their other boat. We must stop them from taking the first boat back to the ship, because then they will come on shore with more men." The captain agreed, and we put a large hole in the bottom of the first boat. We waited. The men on the ship fired a cannon, expecting the boat to return. Of course it didn't. After several more shots, we saw the men on the ship put their other boat in the water. They began to row to the island. There were 10 men on this boat. "3 of those men are good men," said the captain. "I am sure that they only joined the mutiny because they were frightened by the others. One of the others, however, is the leader of the mutiny." We already had 6 prisoners. We put 2 of them in the cave at my country home. The captain chose 2 others that he said he could trust. We untied them, and they promised to help us. Now we had 7 men in our small army. The second boat came on shore. The men in it ran to the first boat and were very surprised to see that everything was gone and there was a hole in the bottom. They began to shout, but nobody answered. Then they stood together and fired their guns into the air. Nothing happened. This frightened them. They got back into the boat and began to row back to the ship. The captain was very disappointed. He thought they would sail away and leave their friends on the island. Now they might lose the ship. However, the boat turned around and came back. 7 of the men came back on shore, and 3 of them stayed in the boat. They rowed it a good distance away from the beach so that nobody could attack it. This was bad. If we captured or killed the 7 men, the other 3 would go back to the ship and sail away. What should we do? We could only wait to see what the men would do. The 7 men stayed close together and walked to the top of a hill. There they shouted again. When they heard no answer, they sat down under a tree. We waited to see what they would do next. They sat there for a long time. Then they got up and started to go back to the beach. We thought they would go back to the ship and sail away. How could we stop them? I told Friday and the first mate to go across the inlet and shout. As soon as they heard the 7 men answer their shout, they were to come back. They should keep moving around and answer all the shouts of the 7 men. The 7 men were just getting into the boat when they heard the shouts from the other side of the inlet. They ran toward the inlet but could not get over it. They called for the boat to come and help them. One of the 3 men in the boat then went with the 7. leaving only 2 in the boat. We immediately went to the boat and captured the 2 men. Meanwhile, Friday and the first mate kept the 8 men running all over the island until they were tired. By this time, they were so far away from the boat that they could not return to it before dark. When they finally got back to the boat, they could not find the 2 men they had left there. They began to shout again. We could have attacked them and killed most of them. However, I knew that they had guns too, and I did not want to risk any of our own men. We waited until 3 of them, including the leader of the mutiny, walked away from the others. Friday and the captain shot them. The leader was killed immediately. One of the others died soon afterward, and the 3rd man ran away. We called out to the others and told them to lay down their guns. They did this and begged the captain to let them live. We put 3 of them into the cave with the 2 who were already there. The captain told the others that if they helped him to get the ship back, he would try to save their lives when they returned to England. They all agreed. We fixed the boat we had broken, and the captain and his men used both their boats to return to the ship. I stayed on the island with Friday to look after the prisoners. The 2 boats reached the ship, and the captain went on board. There was a fight, and one of the men on the ship was killed. The other men agreed to obey the captain again. The captain fired one of the cannons on the ship to tell me that he was safe. He was in control of the ship again. The next morning the captain came ashore again. We shook hands. "You saved me," he said. "And you saved me," I replied. I could hardly believe it. I was going to leave the island. The captain brought food and drink on shore and new clothes for me. It felt very strange to wear ordinary clothes again. We had to decide what to do with the 5 prisoners that the captain did not trust. He didn't want to kill them, so I suggested that we could leave them on the island. We told the prisoners that we could take them back to England, where they would be hanged, or they could stay on the island. They wanted to stay on the island. I took some time to show them how to live there, and the captain gave them some more useful things to help them. I showed them how to make bread from the corn and butter and cheese from the goat's milk. I told them about the 17 Spaniards who were coming. I gave them a letter to give to them, and ordered the prisoners to look after them. I went onto the ship with Friday. I took my goatskin hat and umbrella with me, as well as the money I had put in the cave. The next morning, before we sailed away, 2 of the 5 prisoners swam to the ship and asked to come on board. The other 3 behaved so badly that these 2 were afraid. They would rather go back to England and be hanged. The captain agreed to take them, and we sailed away. I had been on the island for 28 years, 2 months, and 19 days. It took 6 months to sail back to England. I had been away from England for 35 years. Chapter 12. A Rich Man. I went to York and soon discovered that my father and mother were both dead. I still had 2 sisters alive, as well as 2 children from one of my brothers. The captain who had rescued me spoke to the owners of the ship, and they gave me quite a large sum of money for helping to save the ship and the cargo. There was nothing for me to do in England, so I sailed to Lisbon, taking Friday with me. I wanted to find out about my farm in Brazil. In Lisbon, I was very pleased to find the Portuguese captain who had rescued me in Africa. He was an old man now. He told me that he had not been to Brazil for 9 years. The last time he was there, my farm was very successful. He thought I would be a rich man. I wrote to my neighbor in Brazil. 8 months later, I received a reply. He was very surprised to hear from me, of course, but also very happy. He told me that the farm was very successful and that the money earned from the farm was invested. He told me how to get this money and asked if I planned to return to Brazil. However, I had decided to live in England. I had a lot of money and a very good income from my farm in Brazil. I was a rich man. I decided to travel by land back to England with Friday. We crossed the mountains into France. It was a very cold winter, and we were attacked by wolves. However, we fought and killed many of them. Friday also fought with a bear and killed it. It was a very interesting journey. When we arrived in England, I wrote to my neighbor in Brazil and told him to sell the farm. I wanted to go and see my island again, but I made some new friends in England, and they wanted me to stay with them. I stayed for 7 years. During this time, I married and had 3 children. Then my wife died. I wanted to see how things were on my island. I sailed there in 1694. I found that the Spaniards had arrived there, but the English prisoners had behaved so badly that there had been a battle. The Spaniards won, and were now in control. They had brought some women to the island, and I saw about 20 children. When I returned to England, I sent some cows, sheep, and pigs to the island. I had many more adventures after this, and perhaps I will write another book about this later. Playlet, Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe is on his way back to England by ship. He has been on the island for 28 years and is almost home now. He is asleep in his cabin. He dreams.
Help! Help! We'll all be drowned! I told him not to go.
Yes, dear, you did.
Look at the wave. It's too big. Watch out. Save me. Help! I warned him. I told him he would have bad luck.
Yes, dear, you did.
Get on the boat! Everybody on the boat! We have to get off the ship! Look out for that rock! Help! He could have lived a happy life. He should have listened to his father.
Yes, dear, he should have listened. It's his own fault.
It's my own fault. I know it is. I should have listened. My father was right. Now I am alone. Alone! Alone! They are all dead, all drowned. I am the only one left. How will I live now? The wild animals will attack me. I am as good as dead. Nobody can save me now.
My son, you should have stayed in England.
My slave, you should have stayed in Morocco.
My friend, you should have stayed in Brazil.
No, no. I have to go. I have to see the world. You can't stop me. It's my life. But it is so lonely. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years.
Where is Crusoe? My good friend. Crusoe! Crusoe!
14 years, 15 years, 16 years.
Crusoe! Crusoe!
A footprint. Who made it? A footprint. Where is he? I'll find him. I'll shoot him. Show yourself, footprint maker. Where are you? This is my island. Don't worry, master. Friday will look after you. Is that you, Friday? They will find us. They will kill us. They're cannibals, and they will eat us. You know they will. Yes, master. But you are strong and brave, and you have a magic gun that makes death. They are too frightened. They will not come back.
You saved my son. You saved me. Thank you. But you could not save me.
I know. You're dead. Your ship hit the rocks. I wanted to help. I couldn't. I heard the gun. Please don't blame me. I wanted you to be alive, but you weren't. You were dead. How can I save you if you have died? You should have listened to your father. Then you would still be alive. Now I will take your shoes. They'll be very useful.
My shoes. My shoes.
Shh, shh. Be quiet. They will hear you. Don't make a noise. We must hide from them. Get into this cave. Oh, what is that? Look at those eyes. Help! Why didn't I listen to my mother?
Why didn't you listen to your mother?
Ha ha! It's only an old goat. I'm a fool. I'm afraid of an old goat. Ha ha ha.
I'm only an old goat. I will die soon. Don't be afraid.
21 years, 22 years, 23 years. Why does it take so long? Friday, help me to bury the bones. I have buried them already, master. Then bury them again. I don't want to see them. I have to build another wall. My goats, my corn, I must save them. They'll take them all. We must keep them away. Don't tell them that we are here. But they are white people, master. White people? White. Is it my father, Friday?
You should have listened.
No, master.
You cannot leave me on this island.
Oh, yes, we can, and we will.
Shall I shoot you instead, old man? Don't be a fool. This is a nice island. I'm sure you will be all right.
Don't stay on this island, Captain. There are bad things on this island. Dangerous things. Things I can't tell you. You won't like it. 24 years, 25 years. It is too long, too far away, too far away.
Save me! Save me!
Save me! Save me! Wake up, master, wake up. You are having a bad dream again.
Crusoe wakes up.
Huh? What? Who? Where am I? Where? Master, wake up. You are on the ship. The captain wants to see you.
Oh, yes, of course. I see where I am. I had a bad dream Friday.
Yes, I could hear you shouting. The captain wants to see you, master. Shall I ask him to come in?
Yes, of course.
Good morning, Crusoe. Did you sleep well?
I think so, but I had a bad dream.
Well, your bad dreams are over now, Crusoe. Today we will arrive in London. There will be many things for you to see and do. What will you do first?
I don't know, Captain. It has been a long time. 35 years. Who knows what I will find? I suppose my parents are dead. Perhaps my brothers and sisters are all dead too. I'm not so certain that my bad dreams are over now. Perhaps they are just beginning.
I'm sure that you will have a good life now. I want to thank you again for everything you did to help me. Those mutineers were a very bad lot of men. I would be dead now if you hadn't saved me. I will make sure that the owners of the ship give you a handsome reward. It is time to say goodbye.
I have much to thank you for, Captain. I will see you again when we are on shore. Goodbye for now.